Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is mangroves, a world between land and sea. And it will be presented by our fabulous NatHab Expedition Leader, Melissa Silva. Melissa, thanks again for being here today. I'm so excited about this topic. Let's dive right in.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited too. It's a very important topic that I wanted to share with all of you. So thank you everyone for being here. Okay, so let's start. Well, my name is Melissa Silva. I'm a marine biologist. Um, I was living in Jalisco State, Puerto Vallarta, the Pacific coast of Mexico, and there is where I had my first encounter with the mangrove ecosystem. And since the first moment I saw it, and when I was studying, as I learned about this area, I was fascinated by it. So I always felt and then I knew it was one of the most important ecosystems in the world. So today I want to share a little bit of what I know about this beautiful place. So to start, what is a mangrove, or where we can find, or some characteristics of the mangrove trees. They are found on the tropical and subtropical areas of the world. In the subtropical areas, they can survive in places where the temperature through the year doesn't go down under the 16 Celsius or the 60 Fahrenheit. So, well, they basically need these warm, hot weathers. They are found around the estuaries, the river deltas, the coastal lagoons, these flooded areas, swamps as well. And usually we find them in brackish waters. These brackish waters, I will go deeper in a moment. This is a mix of fresh water and seawater. So anywhere where you have like a river going into the ocean, you will find brackish water. These trees are halophytes. That means that they are salt tolerant, or that they can survive on their high concentration of salt in the soil. So going a little bit in detail on what is brackish water. So we consider the seawater to have about 35 grams per liter of water, grams of salt per liters of water. So brackish water will be water that has from 3 to 10 grams of salt per liter. So basically, this is what happens when you have this mix of waters if the river is coming into the ocean, and then in the central part where we find the estuary is nothing but the mix of these two waters. But since they have different density, usually the seawater will go into the river at the bottom of the water column, while the water from the river will go on the top of the ocean water into the ocean per se. So they will be mixing in what we call a gradient. So they will gradually mix. Let's say the fresh water has 1 gram per liter of salt dissolved in it. So if we move through the river going to the ocean, the concentration of salt will be more and more as we get into a fully seawater, which is more or less 35 parts per million or grams per liter. So that's basically what an estuary is, or a brackish water is. So we find this brackish water, as I said, in swamps or in marsh as well. So in this area along the river line or the coastline is where we find the halophyte vegetation. Some examples very common and well known of halophytes are these morning glories that we find on the beach in Florida, for example. That I know we can see those there. Here in Mexico, we do have some similar, not the same species, but we also have flowering plants on the sand dunes. And well, the coconut palm is one of the most well-known halophytes. And in some marshes in the States, we can find like in the subtropical and colder areas, the cord grasses, different species as well, and they are also well adapted to the saline conditions that are found in this area. So going back to mangroves, there are 64 species identified in the world. This number varies a lot from source to source because there are some hybrids that sometimes are not considered as of course, as a species, but a subspecies of or a variety of mangrove. So in some literature, you can find that there are like 50 species of mangrove. In some others, you can find that there are 80, 110. So it depends where you see, but the last consensus is that 64 species of mangrove are found worldwide. So the highest diversity and density is found in this area of Indonesia. You can see right here where this star is spinning. Right there is where we find, and you can see the coloration as well. But also we find the highest concentration of mangroves, or the highest biomass of mangroves, between the 5 degrees south and the 10-degree north. You can see on this rectangle here. And as you can see, well, those are totally tropical areas in the world. So if we go a little bit more locally, we have 6 species in Mexico plus 1 variety of mangrove, and we can find actually 4 species of mangrove in USA. I actually thought there were only 3 species, but in the south part of Florida, and the Keys, I think, if I'm correct, this area right here, there is 1 species that is not found in the other places, but I will go deeper in a moment on that. So just a fast fact about Mexico's mangrove. The country hosts around 6% of all the mangrove forests in the world, and that put us in number 4 in the ranking, the world ranking in area of mangrove, right behind, of course, Indonesia, Australia, and Brazil. And in Latin America, Brazil is number 1, and Mexico is number 2 in terms of area covered by mangroves. The places where we find more density and abundance of mangroves is, of course, the Yucatan Peninsula, where we have a very humid environments. And of course, we have temperate waters and warm waters as well. And some plains, some flatlands on the peninsula. So that allows the mangrove to grow and thrive better. So what adaptations have mangroves for these saline environments, for these flooded areas? So if we imagine these places, the soil is always saturated or flooded with water, with seawater mostly. It's a very unstable soil because of these movements of the tides and the waves. Usually it's an anoxic soil. That means that there's a lack of oxygen due to the presence of the water, once again. And it's a soil where the seeds have some difficulties to germinate because of all the characteristics I mentioned before. So the adaptations that they have is that they have some roots that are specialized to give extra support, called propped or stilled roots. They also have some adaptations on the underground roots that actually they grow, let's say, upside down. They have, we call those negative geotropism. That means that they grow usually the roots grow down, following the gravity of the earth. And these roots, the pneumatophores, they grow upside down, like they grow to the top. So I will show you some images in a moment. And these roots have some pores called lenticels that they act as windows or doors to exchange gases, to exchange the oxygen and to absorb the oxygen and exchange some other gases. And the adaptation for reproduction is that they have some floating seeds, and some of these species are viviparous. I will explain in a moment why is that. They have to tolerate high salinities. They have to tolerate up to 90 grams of salt per liter. So they adapted on that, having either glands or pores that they can exclude or excrete the salt, both in the leaves and on the roots. And to, of course, since they are on the tropics, to avoid the high evaporation rate, to avoid the loss of fresh water, they have some leathery leaves. That means they are kind of like waxy or kind of like thick leaves to prevent the water loss. Okay, so here you can see what I say about the roots. So the prop roots are also called in some other species columnar roots. Those are the roots that come down from the branches. So basically they come from the horizontal branches in a perpendicular way down to the soil. And then the steel roots, those are the roots that come out from the trunk basically, and they grow out and down to give more stabilization. So it's like a lot of legs that the mangroves can develop. The adaptation to the poor oxygen soil is with these pneumatophores that I mentioned. So this is, you can see all of these sticks coming down of the sand. All of those are the pneumatophores. And under that, of course, there's another system of roots, pretty much just like the regular roots of other trees that we know. And then the pneumatophores have the lenticels that I mentioned that are like these pores. Some are big, in some species are bigger than the others. And here is where we can is where the mangroves exchange the oxygen with the environment. In regular soils or regular trees and plants, the roots are the ones also that exchange oxygen from the soil, but the soils are, let's say, dry or they are not as wet as this. So in terms of reproduction, the adaptations that they have is that they have these floating seeds that are called propagules. They come in all sizes and shapes. There, some are the size of an orange, some are just like a nut, and these little ones that look more like a mango, but they are just like 2 inches big. And then we have the propagules from other species, from the red mangroves, that can be as long as 1 foot, 1.5 foot. And these floating seeds can survive in the water if they find like an immediate area where they can establish and grow. They will stay nearby the forest or nearby the mother plant. But in case they fell off from the mother plant in high tide, for example, and then they are taken into the ocean by the tide going out by the ebb, they can survive up to 1 year before they settle and they start growing roots and growing as a mangrove tree. So when we mention that they are viviparous seeds, most of the trees that we know inland, they, let's say, for example, just I think the apples, they grow from the tree and then inside the apple is the seed, but the seed will germinate or they will sprout until they are without the pulp and away from the tree. With mangroves, with most of the species of mangrove, this happens the other way. They sprout and they start growing when they are attached still to the mother plant. So that gives them more chances to survive when they fell from the tree, from the mangrove mother. Here, for example, this image on the left bottom, you will see the first stilt roots of this mangrove, how they help the mangrove to establish and start growing, well, like straight up on these soft soils. Hi, 1 second. So the adaptations that they have to cope with the salinity in these areas, there are basically like 3 different techniques to avoid the salt. One is the exclusion. So that means that they filter the water, but they leave the salt outside. The excretion, that is, they take the water from the environment, but they take the salt as well, and then through some specialized structures, they excrete the excess of salt. And the accumulation, that means that, for example, some mangrove trees, they accumulate the salt in the older leaves. So eventually those leaves will be non-functional and they will fall down with an excess, with an accumulation of salt. So for these adaptations, they have glands and pores on the leaves and the roots. So here, once again, you can see some white dots on the pneumatophores, and you can see some whitish on the roots of this tree, of this mangrove tree. So all of that is the salt that is being either excluded or excreted. And in some other trees, as you can see here on the leaf, on the upper images, you can see some glands that are called nectaries glands on the leaves, some pores that are very visible in this photograph here. And of course, well, the example of how we find the salt crystals on some of the leaves. What I was saying about the adaptation that they have to keep the water within the tissues. Here you can see the leathery leaves or the waxy leaves. They are very bright once they are without salt. So basically, those are some of the adaptations that they have to survive in this environment. So according to the species of mangrove, they can distribute in either right on the where we have the intertidal area or the high tide and low tide areas. They can also distribute in these places that are flooded only in this, I call them like central part of the forest, but the technical name would be like the inner part of the mangrove. And well, some others that are not with these adaptations, they can stay further like inland of the mangrove area. So the salinity concentration will be higher the farther we are from the ocean. So we might think that it will go down because you are getting away from the seawater, but the reality is that since we have this water coming in and out, the high tide flooding these areas and then going away, due to the evaporation, the concentration of salt is higher in these areas. And of course, despite we have also fresh water, most of the fresh water is already mixed with the seawater when they reach these mangroves in the back or the inner area of the forest. So usually the mangroves that we find on the central or the back or the inner area of the forest are the ones that have a higher toleration to salinity. So I will go on the species that Mexico and the States have. Basically, we share the same species. There are some that are found only in Mexico, but I will go specifically on each one of those. So the white mangrove is found in both countries, and these are more like a tree-shaped mangrove. The characteristic of the white mangrove is that they have glands on the petioles that are like the bricks, the branches, the little branches on the leaves. You can see here the image, and they also have some pores along on the sides of the leaves. These trees, the white mangroves, they don't live close to the water, let's say, but they do live where the highest tide can reach. So it's a little bit of, if we go small, medium, and large amount of salt, they will be on the between the medium and small amount of salt in the soil. Then we have the black mangrove. It's very easy to tell this mangrove because most of the barks and the most of the branches and the trunks, the bark is darker than the other, so that's why the name is given, black mangrove. They are also presented in tree forms, so that means they are high plants, tall plants. And the adaptation that they have, very notorious, very easy to tell, is that they have a very well-developed pneumatophores, and they are kind of like skinny. Those are kind of like sticks coming out of the ground. Some other species not presented in the Americas have wider pneumatophores and shorter. So this is a characteristic of the black mangrove. They tolerate a little bit higher salinities, so they are kind of like on the middle part of the forest, let's say. And there's another species of this group of the black mangroves that is called in Mexico Salado or bicolor mangrove. This is the Avicennia bicolor. This is distributed in Mexico. It's only found in Chiapas state, but of course the distribution goes all the way down to Central and part of South America. This one, opposite to the other Avicennia species, can be found in a shape of bush and also in a shape of tree. So it can be short or it can be taller. And of course, it also has some pneumatophores, very well developed, but they also have pneumatophores on the trunk, on the main body of the tree. So that's another way of tell, of course, the distribution, but if you are in this area, you can tell one from the other by these characteristics. The red mangrove, this is like the most known or the representative mangrove species, because if you type, if you Google mangrove tree, you will see this image for sure. They have very well developed stilt roots, so that's like the characteristic that we all identify the mangroves with. We can find this species specifically, Rhizophora mangle, in both forms, as a bush and as a tree. And well, this is the group, the Rhizophora group is the one that presents the sprouts on the long, excuse me, the propagule seeds in this long shape, up to 1.5 foot long. This species specifically is the one that is found where the tide, where the waves are breaking, or where we have more movement of the water and softer soils. So that's why they have this adaptation, and they are like very, very important to keep the soil in on the beaches. Then there is another Rhizophora species, Rhizophora harrisoni, that is found only in Mexico, not in the States, but it also has a distribution to the central part of the Americas and some part of South America as well. And they do have still roots as well, but they are not as big or as developed as the ones in the Rhizophora mangle species. And this species, we only find it in Chiapas, and well, the same characteristics as the previous. Then another species that we share, the States and Mexico, is one that we call Buttonwood mangrove. This, in some literature, you will find that is not a true mangrove, because if you go in the botanic description, they don't have propagules, they don't have this live or viviparous seed, and they don't have pneumatophores. They don't have these roots that come out the ground to breathe, neither the lenticels also. So they do have salt glands on the leaves, on the upper and central area of the leaf. But well, they are associated, let's say, to the mangrove forest. So in terms of ecological talking, we will say they are mangrove because they are part of the ecosystem, but in terms of botanic characteristics, they are false mangroves. In Florida, there's a restricted distribution to the south part of it on the state, so that's why it's a shared species, but sometimes is not considered such as a species presented in the states. And we can also find this as a bush or as a tree form. And the variety that is presented only in Mexico of this same species is Conocarpus erectus. It's basically the same. It's exactly like the same characteristics, but they have different coloration on the leaves, and they also have salt glands on the petioles, on the little stick that is attached to the leaf. So they have the glands on the top of the leaf, and they also have two glands, such as the white mangrove that have. And well, this has a restricted distribution in Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula only, and some spots in Oaxaca and Chiapas states. So what's the importance of the mangroves? Well, there are many, but we will focus in some only because we can talk about this forever. And I think one of the most important is, of course, the biodiversity that they can help us to take care of, but also they protect the coasts. They control the pollution of the environment. I will go in detail in some of those. They filter water, as I mentioned before, the roots of these red mangroves. They help the soil and the sand to stay in, like, on the beach. And for example, they prevent the sediments to go off to the ocean. So when they are associated to coral areas, to coral reefs, they keep the water clean for the corals. So for example, let's start with fisheries, how they can help us with fisheries. So there are thousands of fish species that are found in the mangrove ecosystem, and that is because these areas are called nurseries for fish species, and also for crustaceans, mollusks, and well, birds, of course, that's very common to see. So basically, they are kind of, I will say, like a refrigerator in nature in these tropical areas, because they storage a lot of food for these animals that can either live there for part of their lives or live there all of their lives. So for example, if we find birds that are migrating from northern areas into Mexico, we will find them roosting or resting in the mangrove areas. They are feeding on the animals that are in these areas, so they have two benefits from the mangrove ecosystem. And then if we go underwater, for example, we can have the scavengers, we can have the small predators that they will feed larger predators, and at the end, some coastal communities will have benefits of from this ecosystem. And then there are some important species in the international fisheries, such as the shrimps, that they also spend some time, some part of their lives in the roots in the area where of the mangroves, where they find food and shelter. So for example, speaking about coastal protection, the mangroves are even like way more efficient than any other infrastructure, such as the breakwaters, as that you pretty much know. So they are more efficient in terms of keeping the waves down or low during a hurricane, during a storm. So basically, they can reduce the strength of the waves in a 60% when they arrive to the coast. So if we don't have mangroves, that's why we have the waves coming all the way into land, and, well, destroying the urban infrastructure that is associated to the coast. So that's one of the importance. And here you can see on the diagram what I mentioned, that when they are associated to the coral reefs, they also protect the coral reefs from all these movements of crazy movements or strong movements of the waves during a storm. So that increases the health of the coral reef and the biodiversity as well. So another thing that is like super important and very interesting is the climate regulation that the mangrove forest or the mangrove trees give us, because they storage a lot of carbon mostly in the soil. So here, for example, you can see this diagram. The colors, well, the carbon storage on the soil, like more than 1 foot down the soil, on the first foot of the soil, the orangey coloration, and then the top, the clear green, is the biomass, the carbon that is on the ground or above ground. So you can see that we might think the tropical forest, the jungles, can be a carbon storage, like huge, but in reality, the studies that have shown that the mangrove forest can storage from 3 to 5 times more than carbon than the tropical forest, and that is in the global average about 1 ton per hectare of mangrove forest. So that's something very important to keep in mind, because they don't only storage that carbon, that CO2 from the atmosphere, but if we destroy the mangrove, if we take off the mangrove to build a hotel, for example, and just to put an example, in Mexican Caribbean happened that. So when we cut that mangrove, we are releasing the CO2 to the atmosphere. So here, for example, the data that I found to be very important to know is that the annual loss of mangrove is releasing as much CO2 as the annual emissions of Australia. Like all of the Australian emissions are being released if we keep cutting the mangrove at the rates that we are doing up to now. So that's something to keep in mind. Another very interesting and important thing related to the mangrove ecosystem is that they are a very important area of ecotourism, of nature-minded tourism. Globally, it's very, very important for bird watching, for kayaking through the mangrove channels, and also for artisanal fishing in these areas, for example. So one place that I wanted to mention in this specific topic is the El Salado Estuary. This is a natural protected area in the Pacific coast of Mexico, in Puerto Vallarta city, and right now it is not already. It just grew, let's say, in category to be a state park. So it has a little bit more protections coming from the state government. So it's basically the only one, or one of the very few urban estuaries, and that is because, as you can see in this image, is right in the middle of the city. So I don't know if I have another map here. I think so. So basically, it's surrounded by the city of Puerto Vallarta. I hope you can see the image right here. Of course, the blue is the estuary, and all around is the urban development of Puerto Vallarta, surrounding the El Salado Estuary. So something very beautiful to notice on this photo is the different coloration of the vegetation, and that gives us the clue to the different species that we can find in this estuary. So remember, the ones that are by the water are the red mangroves. Then we can find white mangroves, black mangroves, and then on the very back, some Buttonwood mangroves. So you can check on this photo here. And well, it's important, of course, because being in a developing city, in a touristic center, the estuary is home for a lot of wildlife. It's home for, of course, birds that come and nest here. You can see this chick of well, an egret, and or a heron, I think, and a lot of reptiles that are found here as well, mammals. And actually, you can see if you notice on this photo here, there is a bridge right here crossing the main channel of the estuary of El Salado Estuary. So from this bridge, you can walk there, or you can pass by your on your car by here. You can see the estuary, and sometimes you are lucky enough to see some of its inhabitants, such as the crocodiles. So in this area, this protected area, there is like a project for reproduction of the and protection, more than reproduction, protection of the crocodiles that are in this specific area, because well, with all the development of the cities along the coasts, the crocodiles are losing their habitat. So well, these are some images that I wanted to show of how you can find the interaction of the mangrove with other ecosystem and with other species. Here on the bottom line of this picture, you can see corals, a brain coral that is very distinctive, and some others that are right next to the mangrove forest. Another egret. Right here, you can check the pneumatophores and some of the seedlings of this forest, mangrove forest. The same, some other birds resting or nesting in this area, some other species of fish. These ones, for example, this species that we can see on the bottom of the image is the yellow-tailed surgeon, and I know it in Spanish as chancho. I've always seen these associated to coral communities, to coral reefs or rocky reefs communities. So to see the same species, adult fishes, swimming like in the roots of these mangroves is just give me, I can understand how the association of this is, and I can give you the interpretation of how important this is for those kind of fish of environments. This one is a photo showing a community associated to the roots that are all the time submerged. Here you can see the anemones, a lot of anemones, a lot of sponges, these greenish sponges. Somewhere here were some sea urchins, and I don't know if you can see, but all the little things that look like dust or like drops here and there, those are fries, fish fries, baby fish that are just looking for protection between these roots, and of course feeding on the detritus or on the little other plankton that is found in here. Here as well, you can see the association of some sponges on the roots, but also you can see seagrass right here on the left side of the image. Some seagrass, some fish fries as well, a little bit bigger this time. They look like sardines. So you can see how they are associated to the coral reefs, to seagrass beds, and the importance of these roots, the system of roots, for the protection of a lot of species. This is also another very beautiful photo showing two lemon sharks. These are lemon shark juveniles, basically. They are not full-grown adults. And the same, they are just checking the area for food, but also looking for protection from bigger sharks, from other predators. And then this is something very, very marvelous. There are other species that we sometimes don't even imagine they are associated to mangrove areas, such as the Bengali tigers. In Sundarbans area in Bangladesh, which is one of the biggest estuaries in the world, one of the biggest mangrove forests, we can find the Bengal tigers just like hunting there, swimming there, moving from one area to another. And this is just, I think, a very beautiful image of, well, the mangrove ecosystem, showing one of the fauna that is associated to it. And well, this is another video that I wanted to show you. This is other place in Mexico. It's called La Tobara, and basically another estuary in the Pacific coast as well, associated to a place named Marismas Nacionales, and these are just a huge extension of mangrove. And well, as you can see, there's a panga going through the channels there, and it depends the time of the day, but you can see the crocodiles, you can see a lot of birds going in and out. You can find there, for example, the white pelicans that are migratory, they come and rest here. You can find the roseated spoonbill, the putu as well. So it's a very beautiful place for the humans in terms of ecotourism. So basically that would be it. I don't know what questions you have for me, Sunny.
Melissa, thank you so much. Before we start the Q&A, I just want to remind everyone that they can submit their questions via the questions field in the control panel. We have a few already, so let's go ahead and dive into those. Are the fruits of the mangroves edible?
Some of them are, yep. See, some of them are eatable. Actually, in some areas, I don't know if in Mexico, I've never heard of that, but I know in South Asia, they use the leaves to prepare tea. They use the products, the fruit, the leaves of the mangroves as a medicinal product, like in the traditional medicine, they use it. So they do eat them. So yeah, some of them are edible.
Interesting. Okay. At what age does a mangrove plant begin to reproduce?
Hey, like everything in biology, depends on the species, but usually in general 10-20 years. 10 years is like the average for most of the mangroves that we have here, when they have the seedlings, the propagules.
Okay. Does one species of mangrove grow faster than another?
Usually the red mangrove is the one that grows a little bit faster. And actually there's a very important fact about red mangroves, that we call those kind of species like colonizers, or those are like the first species that settle in an area, and they allowed other species of vegetation to grow. For example, if there's this little red mangrove seed floating on the sea and then arrives to a place where there is no other mangrove species, they have the conditions to grow, they will grow faster than others, and then they allowed other species of mangroves to arrive to that same place. And since the red mangrove already stabilized the soil, they will grow like on better conditions. So the red mangrove is the one that grows a little bit faster than the others.
Can you talk a little bit about how mangroves reduce coastal flooding?
So as I said, they can reduce, for example, right here. They can reduce the strength of the waves during a storm. So it's basically the same. So imagine the mangrove forest and specifically the mangrove roots to be like a sponge or like a cushion between land and sea. I say a sponge because you have the holes where you can find like other things, let's say the animals, the other plants. But basically, it's like a cushion that prevents the waves to hit directly the land and to go further inland. So basically, that's one of the ways they prevent the flooding inland. The other one is that this same root system or root structure, they capture the soil or the soil, all the substrate that is coming from inland into the ocean, and basically they keep a barrier, and they keep all these uh, dirt or sand or gravel, whatever it's coming in with the fresh water. So they are adding land to the beaches. So they are, let's say, gaining terrain to the ocean by having more like like land per se, like soil, like ground attached to to this area between land and sea. So the mangrove can start growing into the ocean by the action of keeping all of this soil. So that reduces, of course, the flooding inland. I don't know if I explained that clearly.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
Some folks who are viewing um, say they lost a lot of mangroves during Hurricane Ian, and they're wondering
Mm-hmm.
how long it will take to recover or replace that mangrove forest.
So naturally, it can take like decades, 1 2 decades, naturally to recover that. But there are a lot of projects, both in the States and Mexico. You can Google, and you will find them very easily because there are several that are basically replanting or uh, like growing in nurseries the
Mhm.
seedlings and then just planting them back to these damaged areas or to areas where there's been a like man-made erosion, like anthropogenic erosion. So yeah, there's a, I mean, it depends. If there's people like a project going on right there, they can recover in a matter of 5 years, 4 or 5 years, if there's like continuous care of that area by the people. If they just let the nature do their job, naturally there can be 10, 15 years until we have like a fully recovered, not maybe fully grown trees, but fully recovered area on the mangrove forest.
Hmm. Are mangroves susceptible to any diseases other than natural threats? Or I'm sorry, I misread that. Susceptible to diseases or other natural threats?
Yeah, as any other species, vegetal species, they are susceptible to fungi. There are some fungi that attack the leaves. Uh, I'm not sure. I've never heard of like a bark beetle type of um, disease, but what I've known is like some fungi diseases. Um, what else? They are susceptible to, well, of course, just like the previous question, when we have like a very strong storm, they can be damaged by that. Um, yeah, but naturally that would be it, like very strong storms or fungi diseases are like one of the most common. Right now they have been affected by the acidification of the ocean, that's been affecting them a little bit, the same as with the corals. But in general terms, they are a little bit more they can adapt a little bit faster to that than other species due to the very difficult conditions that they already live in. So yeah, that would be it.
Interesting. Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Can white mangrove become red mangrove if the water level rises for a long time?
No, no, the species they will stay the same even if they are closer to the water or away, or like closer to seawater or closer to freshwater. The species of white mangrove is white mangrove, and they never change in that matter. So they might adapt to the new conditions. They might, I don't know, they might excrete more salt or less salt, or I don't know, they might find some adaptation, but they will basically remain the same. They will thrive better in this area of the forest rather than the other. So yeah, they don't change from one to another.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back to you now for some closing comments.
Sure. Well, no, thank you all. Thank you, Sunny, for being here today. And just as I always say, keep exploring. There's always more to see. Whenever you have the chance to come to Mexico, specifically to Puerto Vallarta, go and visit El Salado. It's a marvelous place. If you are in the Florida area, Texas, go and visit the mangroves that you have there. Support the local projects. That's very important. So just share the information, look for more information, do your own research. You will find some fantastic things that I was not able to put in here, but there are beautiful, beautiful photos that you can enjoy, beautiful readings, very interesting and very important about the mangrove ecosystem. So that would be my closing comment.
Melissa, thank you for taking the time to present for us today. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Please join us again tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.